Everyone, let's welcome Gabe Hicks to Dragon Talk.
Yay! Welcome.
So excited.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. So I've listened to a lot of the shows, so I was like, really? Yes, let's do it.
Wow. That
Excellent.
surprises me.
Yeah, I like I like podcasts, especially because I like something that I can have on that is background sound that interests me while I'm still being productive. Because if I can hear other people talking and having a conversation, it like feeds that social need in my head without actually having to talk to people.
Oh yeah.
Are you more of an introvert?
I'm not. That's the problem. But I'm more of an introvert when it comes to like focusing on a piece of work.
Yes.
Because I'm excited to talk about stuff after it's done. But if it's in the middle, I'm like, let me get to a point where I want to talk about it.
Yes.
That makes sense.
I like silence when I'm working. Really? Like I know a lot of people will have music going or some background noise, but I just live in the silence.
I think silence relaxes me. And if I get too relaxed while I'm working, then I feel like I lose focus.
That makes sense. Yeah.
That would. Yes.
For me, what's really conducive to working is having my kids come and bug me every 5 minutes.
That's helpful.
You really get into the flow that way.
Yes. I especially like being asked to do things that small humans could actually do for themselves.
Yes.
Or perhaps they could ask the other able-bodied adult that lives in this house.
That's getting too far into fantasy.
Perhaps you could make a sim based on that.
That's something that probably relates to something we'll talk
Mom
about today,
sim.
ironically. Well, there's the dad dating sim.
Excuse me?
All
right, let's just jump in. What?
So there's a dad dating sim called Dream Daddy, and it's funny because I cosplay as one of the characters like regularly. Because he is a dad that has glasses the same as I do, dreadlocks, has a thing for coffee, plays the piano, and I do all of those things. I don't have a child, but I don't think it matters at this point on the internet anymore. Like I've accidentally adopted people at this point.
Yeah, I mean,
accidentally.
Yeah, I've had people be like, "Will you be my dad?" and then ask me for advice, and I'm like, "Whatever, sure, yes, you know what? Go with the blue one."
Dude, you could just say, you don't have to just ask dads for advice. I could just be your friend.
I don't want to be their friend because then that gets weird.
Being their dad, their adoptive dad, isn't weird.
You got me there. You got me there.
I mean, unless it's like all part of the cosplay. Like you're really in character.
It really is. Because the nice thing is that dad is like, he makes bad puns and he's really awkward. And I'm like, that's just me. It's really easy to be this person.
You don't need to be a dad to do that, to make bad jokes. And,
Yeah, and I like that you stopped with the dad phrase with dad, because if someone was asking you to be your daddy, that's very different.
And that has come up. I don't answer those messages.
It's probably for the best.
Yeah. It was when the game first came out and like I did that costume, there was like a straight week that it just happened. And then I think I got desensitized to it because I'm like, oh, there's another one. All right. Oh, this one's about cheese. And
that went up.
Yeah. It was someone was recommending me things to do with smoked Gouda, and I still have those recipes from like 2 years ago. That was one of the best messages I've ever gotten in my life.
Yes, I would appreciate that. That's constructive. That's informative.
Yep.
It's like based on your interest.
Did you mention
what else can
cheese?
you do with smoked Gouda?
Why was smoked Gouda like the random thought that was?
Oh, that did not come up. That was
no.
You look like someone who would appreciate some tips on what to do with smoked Gouda.
Yes, yeah, and I was so okay with it.
You're like, oh, geez, yeah.
I'm like, well, you know what? They're actually right. Let me see what they have to offer.
Now that's someone that knows you better than you know yourself.
Yeah, I still talk to that person. They live in Poland, but they're really nice.
Wow, that's really. Are they a cheese purveyor? Are they? Is it really like?
Are they a cheese influencer? Are they an influencer for the cheese industry?
After that first conversation, we have never talked about cheese.
Cheese influencer. Yeah. I like.
Wow, that'd be fun.
I want to be a cheese influencer.
Yeah. Is it weird that like I feel like I can smell smoked Gouda now? Like I'm like I'm triggered. I'm triggered in the best way.
The smell-o-vision of the internet right now.
It might be my dog. I feel like
if you become a cheese influencer, it's a great way to become a wine influencer. Like I feel I could easily see that transition. Like, okay, we like this wine brand. Let's try to hook you up, and then you just legitimately continuously have plates. Oh my gosh, it'd be a great thing to watch.
Now I want to be a cheese necromancer as well. Like resurrecting
you'd be dealing
old
with
cheese.
Like the blue cheeses.
The blue cheeses, right? The ones that are like already decaying a little bit and how delicious they might be.
And like the stinkier foot. Like, this is like ripe foot smell.
You could use the smell to incapacitate people. I don't like that I'm convinced on this.
I don't know. I feel like cheese
design
is
wheels churning right now. The wheels of cheese are turning in your head.
The wheels of brie. You can be a cheese influencer at our local grocery store back when we used to be able to go into it. But they would have those times? In the before times. There was this adorable, I'm sure he's still there, older man who used to wear like the red coat of that, and he would stand there dealing cheese samples to you, and he knew everything about cheese. And one day Bart went to that grocery store wearing a red jacket, and people were like, "Excuse me, can you please recommend a good Parmesan?"
Can I say the smoked Gouda is very good.
Cheese has so many flavors, and especially recently, I've extended my cheese palate, and I think I don't know. I went to visit one of my friends months ago, and he was like, "Oh, Gabe, I have all these exotic cheeses." And I'm like, "All right, sure." And I scooped one, and I think it was like a smoked honey brie, and it was good, but there was like 12 things happening at once, and I didn't know how to feel. And I think that's one of the things that makes sense to me about why people focus on cheese, because when you talk about people who try different things or say, you can taste the oak or you can taste the blades of grass or something. And I don't always taste like the extended flavors to it. But cheese is something I feel like it's very easy to taste hints of anything.
Yeah.
And it hits on different levels of the taste buds way better. Maybe because you're referring to wine when people are like, this tastes like graphite. Yes. And I'm like, graphite? Why would I want to taste graphite?
Why do you know that taste?
What, you didn't lick pencils when you were a kid?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I always thought those were suggestions. Like once people put it in your head as you're sniffing it or drinking it, then you're there. But like that's not true with cheese because it's all there and it stays on your tongue for a longer time. And so you can kind of experience it a little bit more. I love that we're doing a deep dive in cheese.
I do too. Yeah.
What can we do with cheese? A cheese-based D&D class. Now, I really do want to get this going.
What can we take from like a good piece of cheese and all of those different notes and components you're talking about and compare that to like a really good narrative story?
The brie lock.
Your patron is...
I love that you had an answer.
Allison Brie is your patron?
You know what? That's way better. That's way better. You could have a spell called community. Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
It's right there.
You are going to be taking so many text notes tonight.
Voice to text notes.
Voice to text.
You're absolutely right.
So if Hidden Treasures was a cheese, what cheese would it be?
I think it would be cheddar because cheddar is so widely used in different ways. When you have specific cheeses, people will be like, yes, this is good for salad, or like this is good by itself, or this is like a good dessert cheese. But cheddar is something that you could have shredded, you could have sliced, you could have it in cubes by itself. You could have melted cheddar, and then it's an entirely different experience.
Powdered cheddar?
Exactly. So I think Hidden Treasures would be cheddar because it's familiar in a lot of ways. I built it as a dating sim for people who have played those, a visual novel for people who just like going through a story, a game that has tabletop elements. So like there's a strength stat and an intelligence stat, and you have numbers to it. And all it does is the computer picks a number between 1 and 20, and then it just adds that number to it to determine success or fail. And I even programmed it so it shows you what number you got, so you know if it was a success or fail. So that way, if you're like next time you play through, like, okay, I'm going to intentionally make the stat lower because I want to see what happens when I fail on that thing. So there's a lot of elements that people will recognize and people will understand, and there's different ways to approach it. Because I had outlines for what I wanted each like character's story and dates to be. But then I gave those to the writers, like, and I found different writers because I said, I don't want this game to be, this is all Gabe's writing.
Right.
Because if it's all my writing, then the different stories will all just feel like it's just me telling them to people. If one of the characters is named Callow, who is a Goblin Ranger, and he has a slash across his left eye, so he's blind in his left eye. And if I'm writing the story for him and the barbarian character who's like akin to a gentle giant, I don't want there to be like crossover for how I have them speaking or how I have them reacting. If I write Callow and someone else writes the barbarian, it feels like it's someone different telling the story. And that's one of the things I've been the most proud of, seeing the writers like take a hold of the ideas and bring it together.
That's like combining what people really love about Dungeons and Dragons with this game, is that it is a collaborative storytelling experience. And that's exactly what you're doing by, making this with all those writers.
And it's like example with any tabletop game. That's why it's exciting playing with different DMs. Because you don't have to have a favorite DM. You can love the way this DM tells a story about combat. You can love the way this DM tells a story about mystery. You can love the way this DM tells a story about romance. And you can go to those different people for the different things that you want. So then if you have different types of stories, it'll be like, I do like the way this one was done, or I like the way this one was done. We live in a world where variety is so readily available that I think we should let ourselves have it more. And pretty much any facet of gaming.
That's a really interesting thought. I mean, I know Shelly's been doing some interviews about how to DM, and one of the more recent ones was co-DMing. And that's a great way to bring what you're talking about to at least the same, kind of linear campaign.
Yep. Something I've done even just for my home games. So one of the other things that I do is voice acting. And I've been voice acting for about a year and a half, and getting a part of that community, I met so many other people that love voice acting or do it. And I've reached out to at least 15, I think, people about just recording little lines for NPCs that I had in my campaign. Because if I had like a rant for the big bad, I have a voice in my head, but it doesn't mean I can do it per se. Or if I can, if I can, maybe there's more tones that I want to it. Or if there's like a strong femme character and it's like, I could portray this, but I also don't want to make my voice sound like a stereotype. And I know, like, I'm like, you know what? And I know that Tara does an amazing, powerful voice. And then it's like just commissioning a couple voice lines from them and then just playing the audio for my players. And then they're like, oh, wait, what? Now it's real.
That is a fantastic idea.
That's really cool.
Yes.
People love to be a part of other people's campaigns. If it's like, by the way, I played that recording for the players and I thought they were going to fight, they ran.
Because you creeped them out so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, because awesome. I feel like even with you doing it, and even unintentionally, the way that you portray that voice would probably still convey some of what you want to happen in the story.
Exactly.
So if it's just completely objective, then the story could go in any direction.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
All right, Shelly, I think you got to start recording your voice and making it available for people.
I think I like, if you want like some C-3POs in your game, I might be able to help you out.
I hope you know this. You cannot offer me that and think that I won't take you up on
it. So when you play it for your players, they're going to go, no, wait, what was that supposed to be again? You didn't actually pay for this, did you, Gabe?
Yes, I did. Roll initiative.
Oh, that's really... I forget the name of the service, but isn't there this service, Cameo, where you can pay $150 for Anthony Daniels or Steve Guttenberg or anybody who's on it to record whatever you want them to? What if you did that?
Oh, my God.
You couldn't do it that much. Your money would run out, but there was a lot of rich people out there. What if you were doing that for your D&D campaign, or at least you had like a villain line or something like that you wanted to be able to do, and all of a sudden you got Morgan Freeman to do it? Like, that'd be amazing.
Like I've thought about and I don't have the time for it, at least not now. But I've thought about, especially people who are interested in voice acting or people who are just interested in involving themselves in role playing more, just setting up like a thing where someone's like, I'm looking for this kind of voice for a villain for my campaign, and I just need them to record a couple lines. And if you gave someone like $10 to record maybe like 2-3 lines for your big bad that's just coming into the scene, and you just play it, like it's an awesome thing that you can have. Other people could use it if they wanted to.
Yes.
But then again, it's less work for a person as a DM. And one of the best things about having a pre-recorded thing is that players are less likely to interrupt.
Oh.
That's very true. Or make a little snide comment and break the immersion and all the fun stuff that usually happens during a D&D game.
If they're listening to a monologue that's not coming from the DM, they're like, oh, we have to sit and wait and see what everything is said now.
And they spent $150 on this, so we better pay attention to it.
Yep. I'm not going to cut off Morgan Freeman. Nope. I'm letting him say his piece. We might have to fight, Morgan Freeman, demigod lich, but whatever. Just let him get his piece out, and then we stab.
I love a really cool idea.
So you were talking about coming up with like a marketplace for that type of thing?
I was going to use the exact word, marketplace. Yeah. Like like you hang up your bulletin and looking for Martin or Morgan Freeman type voice actor.
You know who you should pitch that? And then we're getting into business here. Ben Looms, who does Sirenscape, because he basically does that, for the sound packs that he creates for Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
And you might even be able to, and he sells things piecemeal, usually by sound packs, but you could, that would be amazing. NPC and I offer my services.
Because especially getting confidence in role playing is way more difficult than I think we acknowledge in general, because you can have fun, but it doesn't mean you feel confident about what you did or like the character. And I think if it comes to running a game, not having that confidence means that you miss a lot of opportunities you could have had.
Right.
So if this helps bypass that concern about making this character real or intimidating or interesting, I think it would also incentivize more people to run games and run campaigns and have more stories to tell.
Yeah. And it would go some way towards combating the complaint that I've seen of some people where watching a show like Critical Role, for example, that has voice actors in it, and the voice acting is so good, and then wanting to jump in and play Dungeons and Dragons and having that feeling of like, hey, I'm not as good at Matt Mercer is at doing these voices and things like that. I never really ascribed to that because I'm like, hey, you can make it your own, and you don't necessarily need to compare yourself to the highest bar in the land. It's not like every kid who's playing basketball is like, I'm never going to be like Michael Jordan, so screw it. I'm never going to do anything. But at the same time, a lot of what you're talking about might overcome that hill, that little hurdle, that mental hurdle, even if you're like, all right, all I need to do as a dungeon master is get to this scene. I can play this, badass recording that I, invested $10 in or whatever it is. And then, okay, now I can play the scene after that. And that, you're right, it might go a long way towards encouraging more play.
It even gives a voice for players in their head, because it might be closer to what you wanted than what you can do. One of the biggest, so I do a lot of stuff under umbrella called Mythic Grove, and I made that because when I did things, I didn't want people to just see it as Gabe doing things. Because there is, if you have a presence in any sort of internet and you're doing things under your own name, people will only see you, even if other people are involved. And I'm like, I don't want that. So I started doing more stuff with Mythic Grove because there's so much that comes out of community input or community value or community creation, which is why a lot of industries, and especially Dungeons and Dragons, thrive. And trying to reinforce that, one thing that I've done is I set up a Twitch channel because there are people who wanted to stream and they're like, I don't know who to reach out. And I'm like, all right, if I did like interviews, I talk to the people, I'm like, here's the key. Do what you want to do. If bits come through, they're yours. I'll just keep track of it. That was just one thing to do that was nice. Another thing is we have been like setting up like a game jam for people to just create things and then put like supplements out, or like put like little game ideas out, because it's just incentivizing them to do that. one thing I did months ago was like, I did like, I'm looking for someone to fill in a voice for a character thing. And I'm like, how would you phrase this voice? And then a lot of people just did recordings. And then some people were in comments like, oh, I like that. Do you mind if I use this? And they were talking to each other rather than like me having to be a liaison, because when you make that conversation, it just happens. And I think that's what I want to do the most. I want to make the conversation. I don't have to control the conversation. I don't have to guide the conversation. But if I can make the conversation, I can like get these people in the room to have the party, and then I can go somewhere else, but know that they're probably not going to tear each other apart. And if they do, it's the internet, so I can just block and delete and then go about my day.
It's like goblin matchmaking.
Yeah.
But you're doing it for everybody. You're bringing people together, creators together, and giving them a place to create freely and give them, Twitch can be overwhelming for somebody coming into it and not knowing the first thing about streaming, but you're making it easy for them.
I remember being terrified, thinking that like anything I made was not going to be good enough for a single person to consume, it's an understandable fear, but it's not a reasonable fear.
How so? Because a lot of people, I mean, I believe you, but I know a lot of people absolutely have that fear.
Yep.
But how do we know it's not reasonable?
I'd say it's not reasonable because if you can look at something someone else made, why can't you assume someone would look at something you made and enjoy it? If you can ever have a moment where someone made something and you were like, oh, that's cool, you have no idea how nervous they may have been about making this thing. But you have the whole perception of like, this is awesome. Oh, this is cool. Or like, that's neat. So the concern that I had, it's understandable because it's self-value and self-worth, especially as a creation where we live in a world where in a competitive environment, we don't seem to acknowledge not everything has to be a competition.
Right.
And if I can look at something someone's made and be like, that's cool, I would like to make something that it reminds me of that. Someone else might be like, Gabe made that thing? That's cool. And then it can continue.
Yeah. So you touched on something about creating something to give someone the same feeling that you felt when you read something or played something or experienced something. Like that's very generous. That's very wholesome. And I think a lot of times creators feel maybe a little selfish or something, or like I'm putting this out there because I want affirmation, because I want fame or whatever. And it's really like how you just said it for me. Like Greg and I are both, we write. Greg has done stand-up comedy and all that. And like, I always tell people, like, I just want to put stories out there because I think people will relate to them. And I think they will get a feeling of like, somebody understands me.
Yep.
They've been there too. And that's it. Like, I don't care if I never make a dime off of it, but having people be able to say like, oh, thank you. Like, I actually feel a little bit better because we have the same experience. Yep. I love that. I love the way that you said that. But I think it takes a while. Yeah. But I think it takes a while to get out of your head and realize that, a lot of times I will remind myself when I'm reading a book and I'm like, this is amazing and I'll never write like this ever. But I remind myself, I'm like, I wonder what the first draft looked like. Like, this books go through a lot of editing and a lot of revision and years and years and years of work. And so do games. And so does like painting and anything that you're seeing. Like, people aren't just cranking it out whole cloth and putting it out to the universe. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So you have to always remind yourself that, it's a process. Do not compare yourself.
Then.
Okay.
You may never write like that, but that's good, because if you wrote like that, it wouldn't be your writing. It would be you emulating somebody else.
You're right. It would not be true. It would not be genuine. So yeah. God, you're good.
Well,
you are inspiring.
You're touching something too where I mean, that's a lot of what Dragon Talk is about lifting up other voices and making sure that there is focus on all the amazing projects that, like, the Cathedral of Dungeons and Dragons, can hold. Whether it's the narrative storytelling like you're doing, or the music or anything like that people are creating. I mean, and at its best, that's what this community does for each other. Is I want to try that. I'm going to mix that up with something else, an idea that I had in my sleep. And then all of a sudden it's a new thing. And then someone will take that thing and be inspired by it and move it and change it. And then all of a sudden it's got their own, kind of personality tendrils through it. And then it becomes something completely different, even though they might have been trying to emulate, as you were saying.
Yeah.
It's never going to be a perfect copy. It's always going to have some of the personal, touch to it. So even emulation or cosplay is an expression.
Yeah. And so I can talk about it now because they gave me the okay to announce it because of just creating stuff and putting it out there. And when I created something, I was like, I like this. I hope someone else likes it. But if not, I made this for me. And then being able to put those things out there and create more and more, and then seeing people be excited about things that I made. And then like, if I made or when I made money off of it, and then I was able to like make money so I could make more things and work with more people and do more. And it's gotten to the point where like I had a part-time job that I was able to quit completely because I was making enough from this a month and a half ago. And
wow. You were living the dream.
Oh, it only gets better because of all the stuff I've been doing, I signed a contract with Roll20. And they have me as an in-house GM, joining one of their shows, running a GM tips show.
Oh my God, amazing.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it was the surreal moment because I was like, I've been using this system since 2014, like with my friends in libraries.
And now it's coming together.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's hard work, man.
It is.
Pays off.
It really does. And I feel like we notice it when we're not looking around, but then it's like a week later, it's like, oh, I did do everything.
Yeah, you do. Give yourself some credit. Oh yes.
Well, how do you?
I've been working my ass off here.
Like every artist or creator, I will get discouraged because I'm like, oh man, whatever I'm making or creating is crap, or it's not good enough. It's never gonna be worth anybody seeing the light of day of it on something. How do you get past that as Gabe? Like how do you? Because I assume everybody has that same feeling. So like, what makes you feel like, all right, I just need to push past those somewhat irrational feelings to get to the inspiration that you need to kind of push forward?
I literally just let myself get sad, and I'm like, I already started this. I just need to finish it.
Oh. Just own the feeling.
Yeah. If I try to make myself not have those feelings, it's just going to come back another day and probably stronger. But if I'm like, all right, I have doubts about this thing, but once I finish this thing, my mind will be clear to work on the next one that I might like a little bit more. But if I don't finish this thing, I didn't commit. And if I don't commit, I might not commit to the next one or the next one. It doesn't have to be good, but it should be done before I start something else.
Wow. Oh, so really? You don't work on multiple things at once?
I do, but if I've already started one, I feel obligated to at least reach a finishing point with one.
Okay.
Because then I'll archive it, and I could archive it forever, or I might forget about it because there's that new thing excitement, but new thing doesn't mean better. It's just the serotonin of something exciting and new.
Yeah. Yes,
it took me a really long time to realize that. I was like, you know what? I want to make this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing. This thing seems a lot more fun than this thing, but I might have put like 40 hours into this one. And it only takes 5 more to finish it, but this thing is a whole new game. And this thing right here, when it's finished, could pay for this if I just finished it.
Do you ever surprise yourself? Like when you force yourself to finish it, or you're like, actually, this is pretty good?
All the time. All the time. I'm like, what did I do recently? I wrote an episode for a podcast, and I'm like, this is gonna be lame. I don't want to do this. Whatever. And I'm like, all right, it's done. And I'm like, how did the beginning start? Oh God. Oh. And then I had a point where I was like, I made a Google Drive, and then I just like put it as a PDF, and then put like a fake name at the bottom as the signature. And I'm like, somebody sent me this. What do you think? And I like sent it to a couple people, and the feedback was better than I expected. And I'm like, wow, I literally just had to finish this thing. It was way better than I thought. And I think that's another perception. As we work on something longer, we almost get like a skewed idea of the quality of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've gone back and look at stuff that I wrote 10, 15 years ago that I abandoned because I was like, yeah, this is crap. Don't worry about it. And I look on, I'm like, oh man, that was actually really funny.
There's some good nuggets.
Because I forgot the jokes. So I was rereading it. I'm like, oh man, I was really good. What was I thinking?
So
you can trick yourself.
Well, I was just going to say, it's that idea that like, as time goes by, we only get better, but it doesn't mean we weren't good or really good at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's true. I think another thing that is always a challenge for creators is to become objective critics of their own work.
Yep.
Like, the internal editor is often there while you're writing, and I always have to remind myself, like, not your time yet. We don't need you yet. Just let me get it out here. But it's also like, how do you objectively critique the work you're doing, especially in a world where there's so much content out there? Like, how do you stay true to your own voice in the work and decide if it's good?
I think I don't really objectively critique my work a lot. I had to change my perception. I can love this thing. Other people do not need to.
Okay.
Because I can write a story and it can be the best story that I ever feel like I could tell, but that does not mean it is the best story for person A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
And you can still publish it. You can, because you still have a platform to put it out there. You're not waiting for anyone to validate it.
Nope. It might be the best for person H. It might not be the best for anyone that even sees it today or tomorrow or next week. But that one person that finds it a month later that sends me a message about it because they like that story, it's a confirmation that I was not the only one that enjoyed this thing. And where I want that, I don't feel like I need it as much.
Okay.
But I know I'm allowed to want that still.
Yeah, of course. And see, and that's also something that it takes a while for people to admit. Yeah. Like you can still want those things. You can still need those things. So even if it's something that you think is great, you put it out there. Is there ever anything that doesn't make it to that point even? Or are you just like, oh, you need a little more time in the archives before? That
does happen a lot. I feel like as long as I get to like a stopping point, like if I finish a paragraph, I'm like, you know what, maybe I can come back to that, because something that stops me is feeling like I'm not in the right place to do it.
That's a big part of it too, right? Being in the right, not even just mental headspace, but just the bandwidth space to be able to devote to it.
Because I can want this, I can want it to be a quality piece, and if I know I'm not going to put quality to it, I feel like that's an exception to when I put it aside. Because even if I don't have necessarily the motivation to do something, I'll still sit down and do it because that's work, that's life. I know that I can do it, and if I have the energy to do it, even if I don't have the motivation, I can work through it and something is there. But if I know that I do it and it's not going to be quality, that's one of the biggest moments where I'm like, okay, maybe I will take a step back. But I don't even start something else. I just stop doing that thing. Because if I start something else, then I'm going to pick up on that train because it's something new. I'll get new traction in my head, but the traction is not in the same direction I needed to be going.
To bring it back to D&D a little bit, like I feel like I do that with every D&D session I run as a DM, where that's the external deadline. It's like there are going to be people who are going to be, logging on at this specific time, and I can, prep and think about what's going on. But what I love about this medium or playing, D&D in general is just the immediacy of it. Like you have to create, you have to make up stuff in order to keep the game running and going. And I kind of ascribe to the lazy DM kind of way of thinking, because that's the fun part for me. Mm-hmm. It's not fun to do the 4 hours of prep, because I constantly am in that is this good enough zone when I'm not playing.
Perfect. Because even with like any creating, especially with D&D, if you're the DM or you're the player, in situations like this, even if you're not entirely there, if other people are working with you, that changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I'm working on projects by myself, like I will have to sometimes just stop and take a step back and just do something else. But if I'm running a session and I don't know what should happen next, the players are often like, well, actually, you know what? I wonder what's in the tavern. And I'm like, oh, actually, I do wonder what's in the tavern. If you're a creator, I think one of the best things you can have is, I think, working with a team in almost any aspect, even if it's one other person, could literally be your saving grace. Because even if you don't have the motivation, they might accidentally give you motivation. If you don't have the energy, they might be able to make up for it if they're feeling up for it. If you don't feel like you're in the right creative headspace, sometimes something someone else does is what switches you back into it. If you're in a boss fight and you're like, wow, this is hard, but it's not fun. And one of the players tries something that's totally ridiculous, makes no sense, but then like the arrow hits and it collides with something and they're like, I wonder if it's going to do this. Make it happen.
Let's do it.
It's interesting. It's fun. A lot of the fun we have in games, at least for me, it's not about difficulty. It's about pleasant surprise and then like just confirmation of something working or not working. Because then the story can keep going anywhere. It can go uphill, it can go downhill, but there's a balance to it. If there's only one, without variety, it's like eating bland food. We could, but why would you want to?
You could have some really bland cheese if you wanted.
Yeah.
But why?
Or you could have smoked Gouda.
Boom.
And the things you can do with smoked Gouda, let me tell you. Always comes back to the cheese.
Yeah, it does.
So I'm going to make a wild assumption that you didn't just discover games as an adult and you were like, oh, maybe I'll just work in this industry. Like, this is probably a lifelong passion of yours, gaming.
Yep.
So, now that you are in the games industry, do you still love games? Or is it like, too much behind the scenes? I know too much.
I love it. I love it.
Good.
I think my appreciation is even better because now I'm not just watching the show. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that animation was so smooth. Or like, wow, that transition. Or like, wow, they planned this story, this narrative all came together. Looking at the minis, the things of people, like what people create, or like the maps that people draw and put together. I have a new understanding and appreciation for the art and the artists. And it's even more exciting, especially because now like I get to be a part of that process. Or if I'm seeing like this amazing thing, I'm like, I want to make something like that. And I don't have to, but it's like, it's that excitement, just being involved, being along for the ride.
That's cool.
Yeah.
The only thing I've heard from people, or only type of games industry profession that ends up getting burnt out on games, maybe this is just me, but is being a critic of games. Means that like you have to constantly form opinions quickly, and you know it has definitely changed my appreciation of longer games. Like I'm more of a magpie now, where I have to be like, oh, I'll play this for an hour, and I'll play this for an hour, and I'll play for this for an hour, because my brain was always trained to like, okay, I can't spend too much time with one new thing because there's a deadline to write about the next game and going forward. But what I like about what you're describing is like if you're coming at it from the creation side of working on games, there's just always more flavors and more inspiration that you can get by playing other people's games.
Yeah, because there's thousands and thousands of games of single genres, but they're all so different. They're all so different, and it's amazing to see what people can create. Because like even earlier we were talking about the stuff that people do in Unreal Engine that I have no concept of how it works, but it's not stuff happening in real life. It's stuff that was created digitally. And even if I don't get it, it blows my mind because someone made this thing that feels real.
Yeah. And I love that that's being used with, like, say, The Mandalorian, the way they did the backgrounds was all done in Unreal Engine. And it's like, man, it's blending video games with movies even more so now, so that we're just creating things in a 3D space. That's going to be the one genre now, I think, going forward.
Yep.
Fascinating. All right, so I want to go back to the Goblin dating simulator.
Let's make sure we talk about this.
I feel like there's romance and dating is something that is not always easy for dungeon masters to incorporate in their games, but I think there's a lot of people who enjoy that gameplay. And
funny you say that,
right? How would you take all the things you've learned by creating that game, which is a dating sim in a fantasy universe? How could you incorporate some of that stuff in a quote unquote normal D&D game?
I will give you a short answer and then the long answer. The short answer is I actually have a book based on my Goblin dating sim that is a 5e supplement that I'm going to be putting out in October.
Nice.
Literally about romancing NPCs and stuff, because especially as a dungeon master, it's like, I don't know what this person likes. But one of the things that I've figured out for myself is what is the NPC's personality like? Does the player give them gifts? Are they kind? Just considering an NPC as a person instead of an existing object in a world. And it's a whole different perception, because when you're playing games, if you're like, oh, is this person romanceable? Because with digital games, it's very yes, no. But with tabletop games, characters are significantly more alive because it's the improv, it's the narrative, it's always be driven. And one thing that's really worked for me is I literally just outright ask a player, are they trying to flirt with someone? Are you trying to are you interested in this person? And if they're like yes or no, then it's really easy. If they're like, nah, it's just, I wanted a cheaper drink. Yeah. I wanted a cheaper drink. Got it. Easy. Go ahead and roll the persuasion. We'll see if you can get your drink lowered. But if they're like, yeah, you know what? They're cool. They're tough. They can throw me over their shoulder. They can bench 200 pounds. Because then, especially if you're a player and you're like, I kind of want to romance that NPC. If you give your DM that notion ahead of time, then they can make that person come to life. Otherwise, it's really hard to plan that for every person that they come across. Oh, they guess they're going to try to romance the 260-year-old wizard that lives in a stump. All right. Let me just write that up. Oh, no, now they're romancing the werebear. Okay, so it's like just that simple question of are you actually trying to romance this person? It lets me switch my brain to be like, okay, what is this person like? What do they like? Do they think the party sucks? There's no perfect route for it, but I also like doing that sort of thing because it's never the way video games work. It's not going to be after the first conversation they're in love with you. And if they are, you should probably run because it's an incubus or a succubus or something else that will probably try to stab you.
There's ulterior motives there.
That's true in real life as well.
That's true. Yeah, you got me there.
My wife is a mimic, I think.
That's fair.
Pretty sure.
But you made it this long, so I was just
I'm in it. I'm in it to win it. Yeah, who knows? My kids are mimics too now, I guess. But I think what is interesting about this is because you mentioned about how there's different styles of games. Not everybody, it's not for everyone. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if more players would interact with that. How do you as a dungeon master say I'm open to this type of role play or game mechanics without it becoming weird, for lack of a better term? This is not me, the DM, flirting with you, the player. This is the character, and I want to just kind of engage with that, and then also be like, hey, I'm open to this. You don't have to pursue it if you don't want to, but how do you put that in the world without making it seem, like you're an abuser, to be quite frank?
No, that's fair. One of the first things, session 0, if you want to romance an NPC or it's something you're interested in, just let me know. And oftentimes when it gets to a character that they're interested in, one of the biggest things for me is just a language change. I don't say, I take the narrative of that NPC from first person to third person. So that it's not that they're talking to me, they're talking to the person. I'm like, and they smile at you. They have an interesting look in their eyes, and they tell you, instead of like them saying like, oh, well, like, would you go and then come follow me? It's changing the narrative. So it's third person. So that they're not flirting with Gabe, because that is so strange, especially for everybody involved. And two, another thing I had to relearn as a dungeon master, you don't have to say everything that the people say. You could literally just say, they look at you and give you a flirty response. I don't have to say exactly that. I don't have to be like, yes, I do enjoy the way you looked at my ankle. Thankful. And I could just for fun, but it's not something that I have to do every time. And so like the player was like, well, like, would you like to go on a date with me? She looks at you for a moment and she tells you yes. Because then it's a whole different thing. It's not that they're talking to Gabe about it. They're talking to the person, and Gabe is like the deity watching it happen.
You are the person who passes the note back and forth too.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. I'm just, it makes it easier for me to just be a narrator just from that really simple language change.
Yeah, I agree. It's simple but impactful. That immediately took the weirdness out of it for me. Like I was just thinking, how would I want to broker a romantic deal between a player and an NPC without it feeling like I'm in the middle?
And then honestly, after a certain point, I usually just take the reins. Like I'm like, okay, if this is your partner now, where do you two go for a date? How are they doing? Because then it becomes a part of their story, and I don't want to impact that story that's so important to them.
Mm-hmm. You're not going to have a dragon attack in the middle of that date on the picnic in the park?
So honestly, I do ask about things like that. There was a circumstance we were playing a game and a character had a mentor, and I asked, how do you feel about your mentor dying because of this thing happening? And they were like, I'm actually okay with that. And then it did happen in the story, and none of the other players or characters knew. But because it was a character that was so important to the player and the player's character, I wanted to emphasize that firsthand. Because there are dozens of ways for a story to change that don't have to be death, but death can be a strong factor. And understandably, especially now, death is a very hard thing to manage. And in games where we escape, making sure that that thing happening to something that has, or someone that has a close tie to a character that they're playing, that they're portraying, that they're living, if you give them a heads up of this possibility, if you give them almost like agency and control over it happening or not, then it's good. Because there's always a dozen things you don't know. The character that they may have bonded with because it reminds them of their father, and they're not comfortable enough to tell you that. And I can't ask everything, and I can't know everything. But if I mentioned, do you mind if this person passes away? They're like, actually, if you don't mind, like I do have a strong connection to the NPC. Awesome. Not a problem. And then also it removes concern for something happening to these characters. They can focus on enjoying the role play instead of like, oh no, this character is going to die, and then they get stressed out, because then it's not fun, and then they're worrying. And my job is not to make my players concerned about things. My job is for us to have fun together telling a story because we trust each other.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I like that you ask permission.
Yeah.
I like that so much.
I had a situation where I had to make 2 NPCs for a campaign, and then one of them died and the other betrayed us. And like, I was actually distraught because like I had taken time, I'd like written backstories, and like I was personally like really invested in their stories. And then I was actively like really upset about it. And they're just characters in a made up world. But like, even when we're kids, we have characters that are real to us, stories that affect us. If we didn't care about character stories, we wouldn't cry over movies because we know the characters aren't real, but we feel the emotions.
And I like the question there that you gave. It is very much like the mechanic of foreshadowing in narrative, right? Yeah. Where you're not. I mean, so I would, I don't feel like it breaks any immersion or anything like that if you're doing that, because they don't know when it's going to happen. They don't know blah blah blah. You're still controlling a lot of the surprise or anything that as a storyteller. But what you're doing is giving them the like, hey, this might happen. Yep. And as a reader or a viewer of media, we get that all the time. It happens in so much of our movies that we don't even really realize that, like, oh, this was hinted at in Act 1 that this character might have died at the end of this thing. But that's essentially what you're talking about doing with the players.
You mentally prepare them, and if they know that a character is going to die in a dramatic event, it also gives their character a moment to shine after it happens. They're not stuck, oh, what do I do next? It's like, okay, if my mentor is going to die, they might, like, when I asked them and they said, yeah, I'm okay if he passes away, they had a dramatic, like, 2-line moment ready for it.
Yeah.
Which was amazing.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. And that's what storytellers and GMs and DMs do the best, is when you're doing like a little bump, and then it's up to the player or other people to kind of spike that narrative home. And that's gotta, everybody feels good when that happens. Yeah. Even the other players watching or the adversaries, they like seeing it done well. So, man.
So Goblin Dating Sim, one of the things that I did in it is I figured out how to program it so that people could input their own things, like own words or phrases or moments. So like if, for example, it asked you like who your father was, you could give a name to it. And then characters would bring it up. And it's like, so example, if you typed in my father's name is Alan, like, and you put that in the box, a character might, yeah. A character might say later, like the relationship that you have with Alan, that's the kind of thing that I'm seeking to have with this person. Because then predetermining everything isn't always fun. We like games that give us choice and options. Right. And little options like that, it's like, oh, yeah, my character has a dad. My character has a dad who has a name. Oh, this is happy and sad.
Like all good stories.
Yeah. It's got a little bit of everything.
Yeah. I am, as with so many of our guests, I feel inspired. I want to keep talking to you. I want to keep going like forever, because I think, I don't want to speak for you, Shelley, but as a storyteller as well, like I'm like, oh man, I want to just be throwing stuff at your way and have you respond to it, which is, what a good D&D game is like too. So I appreciate it so much, you being here, Gabe. I'm excited about the future for Roll20 and the show. Do you have any details about that you can share, or is it just like that it's happening?
So it's the Lost Mine, the Roll20 Present show that happens on Mondays. I'm joining Monday as a Yuan-Ti wildfire druid named Basil, which is short for basilisk.
Sweet.
Nice. All right, so you'll be a player.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sweet. Can't
wait. And
then
Hidden Treasures.
Yes.
It looks like you guys blew past your Kickstarter goal, but is that still open for people to?
The Kickstarter is not open. There is a Patreon through Mythic Grove where I post background updates. One of the rewards was a pinup calendar that we've done every month. There's all kinds of stuff that you can find on Patreon for Hidden Treasures updates.
Okay.
Awesome.
Where do people go for that?
Patreon.com/Mythic Grove, MYTHICGROVE, making sure that I can spell.
I'm pretty sure
good to test.
Magic the Gathering has the trademark on mythic as an adjective used in games, so we're gonna have to shut you down. No, I'm just kidding.
That's fine. I accept it. My dad's a lawyer, so I'm here for it.
Gauntlet thrown.
And here's your countersuit.
Yep.
That's awesome. Well, how can people get in touch with you online, or want to ask you anything, or just find out all of the many, many projects you're working on?
It's fair. If you want to get in touch with me, the easiest way is Twitter. My Twitter is @GabeJamesGames. My DMs are open. I try to respond in a couple days if I can, but Twitter's notification from my messages is not great sometimes because like if I'm not following someone, it doesn't alert me until I go to my message box, and then there's like the message request and it's like 4, and I'm like, I didn't know there was 1. But yeah, just reach out to me on Twitter. I love talking about games, stuff, passion. If I can't help you figure out something, I might be able to direct you to someone that can, because if I can give you the chance to create something, I'm happy to help.
I think you'll be able to help people. Just it's a sense that I get.
That's all I want. I don't want to make it. I don't want to make so much money that I'm rich. I want to make enough that I can live and play games.
That's a good goal.
Yes,
you've definitely helped me.
Yeah, me too. I'm getting out of my head. And it's real nice. It's real nice out here.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much,
amazing.
Gabe. We'll have you on again
amazing.
soon because I feel like there's so much more to jump into.
Oh,
definitely.
Yeah. I gave it like 2 months. I'm also working on 3 games of my own. Sleep is a myth.
It's a mythic.
I'm so proud of you.